let's jump right into this explainer. Look, if you've ever studied English, you know the absolute struggle of trying to memorize these massive, disjointed lists of idioms. You stare at a textbook, and these phrases just seem entirely random, kind of illogical, and honestly, incredibly frustrating. It feels like you're just forced to accept them without any real reason. But today, we're going to change how you see them entirely. We are going to discover how these frustrating little phrases you try to memorize are actually fascinating historical artifacts. They aren't just random words thrown together to confuse you. They are literal, hidden time capsules of human history.
Now, take a look at this question. Why do we say break the ice when we meet someone new? It's fascinating because it plunges us directly into this wild linguistic mystery. I mean, think about it. Why ice? We use the phrase all the time at modern meetings, awkward first dates, networking events, just to mean easing that initial social tension. But it perfectly illustrates this phenomenal process of how everyday physical objects and barriers from our distant past slowly transformed into entirely abstract social concepts in our modern minds.
Part 1. Origins of famous English expressions. Let's start our excavation by examining some specific linguistic artifacts that you probably use all the time, totally unaware of their true physical origins. We've got 3 great examples to look at that will completely change your perspective. So the crucial point with break the ice is that it used to be completely literal. Historically, ships actually had to break literal ice to move. Hundreds of years ago, before the invention of modern engine-powered icebreakers, port cities that froze over in the winter would become entirely cut off. To keep trade moving, smaller, heavily reinforced boats were sent ahead of the big cargo ships to physically ram and break the ice to forge a path. Without that literal breaking of the ice, communication and trade just stopped completely. Over time, that vivid physical image transferred to human relationships. Just like a ship needs a cleared path to move forward, we need to clear away the awkward silence to start communicating. It's wild how a harsh physical reality transformed into a common social concept.
And that brilliantly sets up our next artifact. Do beans actually have a relationship with secrets? It sounds kind of ridiculous, I know, but it brings us to the very famous phrase, spill the beans.
When we say spilled the beans, we just mean reveal a secret. Seems straightforward, right? Well, the actual historical origin is heavily debated among linguists. One super popular theory connects it to ancient Greek voting practices. The story goes that secret societies or voting councils would cast their ballots using white and black beans dropped into opaque jars. A white bean meant yes, a black bean meant no. If someone accidentally, or maybe purposely, knocked over the jar, they would literally spill the beans, prematurely revealing the secret vote to everyone. Now, as fantastic as that story is, historians haven't firmly proven it, but it shows us something vital. When people forget the real historical origin of a phrase, our popular imagination quickly invents an incredibly exciting myth to fill the void. We've got to be careful not to treat every popular story as confirmed historical fact. Okay, let's look at another one. Hit the nail on the head. We use this when someone understands a complex problem perfectly or gives the exact right answer. This perfectly demonstrates how we absolutely love explaining abstract ideas, like finding the exact truth, through highly concrete visual images. Think about the physical act of hammering. It is completely unforgiving. If you hit the nail on an angle, it bends. If you miss, you dent the wood. But a master carpenter driving a nail perfectly straight down, that's a moment of total precision. We take that very tangible daily activity from the past and we apply it to absolute mental accuracy today. Or take the phrase, cost an arm and a leg. Obviously, nobody is literally walking into a dealership and paying for a car with their actual physical limbs. We just mean it's extremely expensive. But why do we do this? Why not just say that car has a high price tag? Well, because just saying something is expensive is, frankly, pretty boring. Human brains are wired to remember stories and striking imagery. We use vivid, shocking visual exaggeration to make our language vibrant and memorable. A graphic picture in your mind is always going to hit harder and last way longer than a purely abstract thought. Part 2. The mystery of disappearing historical origins. All of this raises a really fascinating question. Why exactly do we lose the original, literal meaning of these phrases over time? Why is it so incredibly hard for modern linguists to track down where they came from? Well, there are 4 main reasons for this historical amnesia. First off, spoken language is much, much older than written language. People might use a colorful expression at the local pub for 100 years before a novelist or journalist actually writes it down. So the oldest text we find is rarely the actual birthplace of the phrase.
Second, the old professions or technologies that birthed the phrase, like blacksmiths, coopers, or ancient sailors, they disappear, but the catchy phrase sticks around. Third, words, sounds, and spellings naturally evolve and get shortened over generations, which totally masks their original form. And fourth, exactly like we saw with the beans, when the truth is lost, compelling linguistic myths quickly spread and permanently replace the true facts in the public consciousness.
Raining cats and dogs is a perfect example of a fading origin. We know exactly what it means, it's raining heavily, and we have concrete historical evidence of the phrase being used for centuries. The writer Jonathan Swift actually popularized a version of it way back in 1710. But here's the crazy part. There is absolutely zero consensus on why those specific animals were chosen. Like, why cats and dogs? The theories are wild. Some say animals washed out of thatched roofs during storms. Others point to complex connections with Norse storm gods. The theories are endless, but there is no universally accepted answer. The meanings survive the centuries, but the actual history completely vanished.
Part 3. The phenomenon of metaphorical semantic shift. To really understand exactly how these physical origins get lost and replaced by modern meanings, we have to look at one of the most exciting processes in language evolution. It's called semantic shift, and it basically happens in 4 distinct generational steps. Step 1. A phrase is used out of pure physical necessity, completely literally, like breaking actual ice in a harbor. Step 2. Someone clever starts using it playfully or metaphorically in a social setting. Step 3. That metaphor catches on like wildfire and becomes the standard, everyday usage for the broader society. And finally, step 4, society changes, the physical necessity goes away entirely, and the literal origin is completely forgotten by the general public. Semantic shift is essentially the bridge that transforms a cold, physical reality into an entirely abstract social concept over hundreds of years.
Part 4. The correct way to learn expressions. So, how do we use this historical knowledge as a highly practical tool? How can you actually master learning these expressions without getting completely frustrated by the memorization? Let's take a look.
The core problem is that you can't just treat English as this rigid, mathematical system of grammar and vocabulary rules. Language is messy. It's a deeply cultural agreement. If someone says, "Give me a hand," and you translate it literally word for word, you'll think they want to chop off your physical hand. You totally miss that they're just asking for your help. Or if someone says, "I'm feeling under the weather," you might literally look up at the sky to see if there's a rain cloud, missing the fact that they're just telling you they feel sick. If you rely only on literal translation, you completely miss the cultural tone, the history, and the context that makes spoken language actually work in the real world. So instead of blindly memorizing massive vocabulary lists, try using this 4-layer framework to study any idiom you come across. Let's use bite the bullet as our example. First, what is the meaning? To bravely face something difficult or unpleasant. Second, visualize the image, physically biting down on something hard while enduring extreme pain. Third, dig into the history. Actually, the popular Hollywood story of soldiers biting lead bullets during battlefield surgery before anesthesia is totally unproven by historians. However, we do know the phrase was firmly established in literature by the 19th century, famously used by Rudyard Kipling in 1891. And fourth, understand its everyday usage. I've been avoiding the dentist for months, but I finally decided to bite the bullet and make an appointment. Breaking an idiom down through these 4 layers, meaning, image, history, and usage, makes it stick in your brain permanently. Part 5. Linguistic archaeology. This brings us to our grand conclusion for this explainer, where we're going to zoom out to see the true nature of the words we speak every single day. You see, every expression we use is actually an archive of human history. They act as a vast collective societal memory. When we use a huge amount of sea terms in everyday English, like learning the ropes or smooth sailing, it reveals the historical importance of naval navigation to that specific culture. Army terms like in the trenches show the deep, lasting psychological impact of wars. Food terms like bringing home the bacon highlight deep-rooted cultural habits and survival mechanisms. And trade terms like run-of-the-mill preserve the daily grind of ancient professions. Studying idioms isn't just a trick to improve your conversational fluency, it's literal social history. It reveals exactly what our ancestors feared, how they worked to survive, and how they view their place in the universe. And that leads us to this absolutely beautiful concept, linguistic archaeology. Think about what traditional archaeologists do. They piece together the daily life of a completely lost civilization from a single piece of broken pottery, a tarnished coin, or the foundation of a ruined building. A linguist is doing the exact same thing, but their excavation site is different. They're piecing together human thought by digging through dusty ancient dictionaries, early Shakespearean plays, forgotten regional dialects, and Victorian newspaper archives. They're basically sifting through the dirt to find that exact, magical moment where a harsh, literal reality shifted into a beautiful metaphor. I want to leave you with this highly provocative thought. Language doesn't just preserve words, it preserves the footprints of those who used them before us. Every single time you speak an idiom out loud, you are carrying forward a piece of a forgotten medieval profession, a bizarre ancient habit, or a centuries-old physical struggle. So the next time you use an expression out of habit, stop for just a second and ask yourself, whose ancient footprints are you actually walking in?